I stood in the living room, staring at the wall where our family photos hung. They used to feel like a symbol of love, of unity. Now, they felt meaningless, as if they belonged to someone else. Her words played over and over in my head like a broken record. I'm not obligated to be intimate with you. She had said it so casually, her voice void of any warmth, as if those words weren't a bomb dropped in the middle of our marriage. Laura, my wife of 10 years, sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered by the impact of what she had just said. I couldn't hold back anymore. Is that really how you feel? I asked, my voice tight, barely masking the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She shrugged without even looking up from her phone. Yeah, that's how I feel. Don't make this into something bigger than it is. We don't owe each other everything, do we? Her indifference hit me harder than the words themselves. I stood there, unable to comprehend how the woman I'd loved, supported, and sacrificed for could act so coldly. You think this is nothing? I said, my voice rising slightly. You think it's okay to shut me out like this and then act like I'm overreacting? She finally looked up, her expression completely void of emotion. Nick, I don't see why you're so upset. I'm just being honest. Don't try to guilt-trip me about it. The dismissiveness in her tone made something inside me snap. I'd spent years giving her my all, emotionally, physically, financially. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building a life together. But in that moment, I realized how one-sided it had become. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Laura slept soundly next to me, her back turned as always. My mind raced through all the times I'd been there for her, comforting her through her bad days, picking up the slack when she felt overwhelmed, making sure she always felt loved and appreciated. Now, I wondered if she ever felt the same way about me. Her words weren't just about intimacy. They were about everything. Our connection, our partnership, our love. If she didn't feel obligated to give anything, then why was I still pouring everything I had into this marriage? For the first time, I considered what it would look like to stop trying, to stop being the one who carried all the weight, who gave all the love, who made all the sacrifices. She had made it clear she wasn't obligated to me. Maybe it was time I showed her what that actually looked like. I turned over and closed my eyes, making a silent decision. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but if she thought she could live without effort, without love, without obligation, then I'd make sure she got exactly what she wanted. The next morning, Laura acted as if nothing had happened. She sat at the kitchen table with her coffee, scrolling through her phone like always, the same routine, the same indifference. It was almost infuriating how unaffected she seemed. I watched her silently as I poured my own coffee, the words from the night before still ringing in my ears. I'm not obligated. She couldn't have been clearer if she tried. And yet, a small part of me still hoped for an explanation, an apology, anything to suggest that she regretted what she'd said. Morning, she said flatly, not even glancing up. Morning, I nodded. The silence that followed was deafening. This was our new normal, I realized. No warmth, no connection, just two people existing in the same house. As I sipped my coffee, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I've been thinking about what you said last night. I began, keeping my tone even. Laura sighed and finally put her phone down, looking up at me with a hint of annoyance. Nick, I really don't want to have this conversation again. Well, I think we need to, I said firmly. You made it pretty clear how you feel. You're not obligated to anything, right? So what exactly does that mean for us? For this marriage? She rolled her eyes, the dismissiveness in her expression stoking the anger I'd been trying to contain. It means I'm tired of feeling like I have to live up to some unrealistic standard. You act like everything has to revolve around your needs, and I'm just supposed to fall in line. Her words stung, but I couldn't let her rewrite reality. Unrealistic standard. I said, my voice rising slightly. Laura, all I've ever done is try to make this marriage work. I've supported you, loved you, and put your happiness first every step of the way. But somehow that makes me selfish. See, she said, leaning back in her chair. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're always playing the victim, like you're the only one who's ever made sacrifices. I've sacrificed too, Nick. You just don't see it because you're too busy feeling sorry for yourself. I stared at her, completely at a loss for words. How could she twist everything like this? How could she act like I hadn't been there for her, like I hadn't given her everything I had? For a moment, I felt the urge to fight back, to argue, to defend myself. But then I realized something. It didn't matter. No amount of arguing was going to change her mind. She'd already made up her mind about how she felt, and nothing I said was going to fix it. Instead, I stood up and placed my coffee cup in the sink. You know what, Laura? You're right. Maybe I've been expecting too much. Maybe it's time I stopped. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything. I didn't give her the chance. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, needing to clear my head. As I walked down the street, my thoughts raced. For years, I'd built my life around Laura, her needs, her happiness, her dreams. But now, I realized I couldn't keep pouring from an empty cup if she wasn't willing to meet me halfway. Then why was I still trying? I spent the day driving aimlessly, replaying every argument, every cold shoulder, every moment that had led us to this point. By the time I returned home that evening, I knew what I needed to do. When I walked through the door, Laura was in the living room, watching TV. She glanced at me briefly but didn't say anything. I'm done, I said simply. She looked up, confused. Done with what? With being the only one trying in this marriage, I replied. If you're not obligated to me, then I'm not obligated to you either. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise with a smirk. Oh, so you're just going to stop trying? Real mature, Nick. I shrugged. Call it whatever you want. I'm done bending over backward for someone who doesn't care. Before she could respond, I turned and walked upstairs. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't going to be easy, but I was done living like this. Laura wanted a life without obligations. I was about to show her exactly what that looked like. The days that followed were different. Not better, not worse, just different. I stopped initiating conversations with Laura, stopped asking how her day was or what she wanted for dinner. I cooked for myself, cleaned up after myself, and focused on my own routine. It felt strange at first, like I was walking through a ghost town where we used to share a life. Laura noticed the shift almost immediately. At first, she acted indifferent, like my withdrawal didn't bother her. But by the third day, she started making passive-aggressive comments. Are you just going to ignore me forever? She asked one evening as I sat at the kitchen table, eating the dinner I'd made for myself. I looked up, keeping my expression neutral. I thought that's what you wanted. You're not obligated to me, remember? Her face flushed with irritation. Oh, so now you're going to act like a child about it? That's really mature, Nick. I shrugged. I'm just following your lead, Laura. She huffed and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door to our bedroom behind her. I heard the faint sound of her phone ringing a few minutes later, and my stomach twisted. She'd been spending more time on her phone lately, always texting or talking to someone. I tried to ignore it before, convincing myself it was work or her friends, but now I wasn't so sure. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the suspicion growing in the back of my mind. What if there was more to this? What if her coldness, her sudden disinterest in our marriage, wasn't just about me? The thought gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed quietly and went downstairs to her laptop. It was sitting on the coffee table, the screen still lit. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of guilt. I'd never been the kind of person to snoop. But then I remembered her words, her indifference, and the way she'd been acting lately. I had to know. I opened her email, and my heart sank. There it was, an exchange with someone named Ryan. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Her reply was even worse. I can't wait to see you again. Nick is so caught up in his own world. He doesn't even notice anymore. The blood drained from my face as I stared at the screen. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Every suspicion I tried to ignore, every doubt I'd pushed aside, was now staring me in the face in black and white. I scrolled further, reading message after message. They'd been seeing each other for months. Ryan wasn't just some fling. He was a regular part of her life now. She'd been lying to me, betraying me, while I'd been breaking my back trying to make things work. The anger that rose in me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I wanted to confront her, to throw the laptop at her feet and demand an explanation. But as I stood there in the dark, staring at the evidence of her betrayal, I realized something. She didn't deserve that kind of reaction. She didn't deserve to see how much she'd hurt me. No, if she wanted a life without obligations, I was going to give her exactly that, but on my terms. I closed the laptop, my mind racing with possibilities. I wasn't going to yell or scream. I wasn't going to beg or cry. Instead, I was going to take control of the situation in a way she wouldn't see coming. The next morning, I started putting my plan into motion. I didn't say a word to Laura as I got ready for work. I didn't even acknowledge her as she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "Are you seriously not going to talk to me?" she asked, her tone sharp. I glanced at her, forcing a calm expression. "I've got nothing to say." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever, Nick. Just keep playing the victim." I walked out without another word, but inside, I was already 2 steps ahead. If she thought she could walk all over me and get away with it, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. By the time I got to work, I'd made a few phone calls, first to my lawyer, then to the bank. If Laura thought she could have her cake and eat it too, she was about to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. This wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control, and I was ready to show Laura exactly what not obligated really meant. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I didn't tip my hand to Laura, keeping everything I discovered and planned carefully concealed. She carried on as if nothing was wrong, probably assuming her secrets were still safe. Little did she know, the ground beneath her feet was already cracking and rumbling. I met with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire who came highly recommended. I laid everything out for her, the emails, the messages, the months of lies, and watched as her expression shifted from professional neutrality to quiet indignation. "She's been seeing this guy for months," I said, sliding the printouts of their conversations across her desk. "I want to protect myself. I don't know what she's planning, but I'm not going to sit back and let her destroy me." Claire nodded, flipping through the papers. "You're doing the right thing by getting ahead of this," she said. "We'll start by securing your assets. If she's been unfaithful, that's leverage we can use in a divorce." "Do you think she suspects you know?" "No," I replied. "She's too comfortable. She thinks I'm oblivious." Claire smiled faintly. "Good. That'll work to your advantage. Let's make sure she doesn't see this coming." I left her office feeling more confident than I had in weeks. For too long, I'd felt powerless, like a passenger in my own life. But now I had a plan, a way to take back control. At home, I continued my performance. I acted distant but not confrontational, keeping up the facade of a husband who had simply checked out. Laura seemed irritated by my lack of engagement, but she didn't push too hard. She probably thought she still had the upper hand. One evening, I noticed her dressing up more than usual. She put on makeup and a new dress, something she hadn't done in months. Not for me, anyway. "Going somewhere?" I asked casually, leaning against the kitchen counter. She hesitated for a split second before smiling. "Just meeting some friends for dinner." "Friends, right? Have fun," I said, forcing a smile. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I'd already planted a GPS tracker in her car, a precaution I'd taken after discovering the emails. Pulling up the app on my phone, I watched as the little dot moved across town, finally stopping at a hotel. It wasn't hard to guess who she was meeting. I sat there staring at the screen, the anger simmering beneath the surface. But instead of confronting her, I decided to use the opportunity to finalize my preparations. Over the next few hours, I called the bank and transferred half of our joint savings into a separate account under my name. I changed the passwords on my personal accounts, ensuring she couldn't access them. I also contacted my HR department to make sure my paycheck would be deposited into the new account moving forward. By the time Laura returned home that night, everything was in place. She walked through the door with a smug smile, like she'd just come back from the best evening of her life. "Good night?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah," she said, slipping off her heels. "It was nice to catch up with everyone." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside, I was counting down the days until she realized the world she thought she controlled was about to come crashing down. The next morning, I made my final move. While Laura was out running errands, I packed up everything I cared about, my important documents, sentimental items, and anything of value, and moved them into a storage unit. The house suddenly felt empty, but I knew it wouldn't be for long. When she came home later, she didn't seem to notice. She was too busy texting on her phone, probably with Ryan. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, marveling at how oblivious she was to what was coming. That night, as we sat in the living room, I decided to test the waters. "Laura," I said, keeping my voice calm, "do you ever think about where we're headed?" She looked up from her phone, clearly annoyed. "What do you mean?" "I mean our marriage," I said. Do you think it's working? She sighed dramatically, as if the question itself was a burden. Nick, why do you always have to overanalyze everything? Can't we just let things be? I nodded slowly, pretending to consider her words. You're right, I said. Maybe I have been overthinking. Maybe it's time I stop. She gave me a strange look, like she wasn't sure what I meant, but she didn't press further, which suited me just fine. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. The wheels were already in motion, and there was no turning back. Laura wanted a life without obligations, without accountability. She was about to find out exactly what that looked like. Tomorrow, I'd take the final step, and when it was done, there would be no going back for either of us. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to see everything through. The house was quiet as I got dressed and headed downstairs. Laura was still asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing right beneath her feet. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking my coffee and mentally running through my plan. The groundwork had been laid. Now it was time to act. By the end of the day, the life Laura had taken for granted would be unrecognizable. Before leaving for work, I placed a neatly sealed envelope on the counter with her name on it. Inside was a simple letter, calm, concise, and devastating. It wasn't an emotional rant or a desperate plea. It was a statement of facts. I told her I knew about Ryan, about the betrayal, about everything. I explained that I had already spoken to a lawyer and secured my assets. The house mine, the savings split, with her share frozen until the divorce was finalized. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I simply laid it out, clear as day. Her lies had consequences, and I wasn't going to tolerate them anymore. By the time she woke up and read that letter, I would already be gone. I drove to work as usual, but my mind was elsewhere. I had arranged to stay with a friend for a few weeks, just until everything settled. Laura could have the house for now. Let her sit in it, surrounded by the emptiness she'd created. Around lunchtime, I got the first message. Laura, what the hell is this, Nick? I didn't respond. A few minutes later, another one. Laura, we need to talk. Call me now. Still, I stayed silent. Let her stew in it. By the time I left work, my phone was filled with missed calls and messages. The tone had shifted from anger to desperation. Laura, Nick, please, we can fix this. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. Another. Laura, I need to talk to you. Please just answer me. I didn't. When I arrived at my friend Jake's house, he greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing look. You're doing the right thing, man, he said as I carried my bags inside. Jake had been through a divorce himself, though under much different circumstances. He knew how painful it could be, but he also knew the importance of standing your ground. Thanks for letting me crash here, I said, setting my bags down in the guest room. No problem. Stay as long as you need. That evening, as we sat in his living room, my phone buzzed again. Another call from Laura. I let it ring. You going to answer that? Jake asked. Not yet, I said. Let her sweat a little longer. Jake smirked. Cold, but fair. By the next morning, the messages had stopped. Either she'd finally given up, or she was planning her next move. I didn't care which. That afternoon, I met with Claire again to finalize the divorce proceedings. She was pleased with how things were progressing. You've got the upper hand here, she said as we reviewed the paperwork. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. Just stay the course, and we'll have this wrapped up soon. As I left her office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. It was all there, swirling together in a way that made it hard to focus. But beneath it all was a quiet sense of resolve. I was done being the one who gave everything while getting nothing in return. I was done being taken for granted. When I got back to Jake's place, I finally decided to answer Laura's calls. Nick, she said the moment she picked up, her voice shaky, a mix of anger and panic. What the hell is going on? You just leave a letter and disappear? What kind of man does that? I stayed calm. The kind of man who's had enough, I replied. The kind of man who's not going to let you walk all over him anymore. She sputtered, clearly not expecting me to be so direct. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. You can't just throw away our marriage like this. I let out a bitter laugh. I didn't throw it away, Laura. You did. The moment you decided to lie, cheat, and treat me like I didn't matter. Don't act like this is my fault. There was a long pause on her end. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost pleading. Nick, I didn't mean for things to get so bad. I don't know what happened to us, but I want to fix it. Please, let's talk this through. For a moment, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the emails, the messages, the months of deceit. It's too late for that, I said firmly. You made your choice, Laura. Now you have to live with it. I hung up before she could respond. That night, as I sat in the quiet of Jake's guest room, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of a broken marriage on my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back. Laura had wanted a life without obligations, without accountability. She was about to find out exactly what that looked like, and as far as I was concerned, she could keep it. Over the next few days, Laura's messages became more sporadic. The angry outbursts dwindled, replaced by attempts to appeal to my emotions. Nick, I know I've hurt you, but we can fix this. Please just come home and we'll figure it out. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for things to get so far out of hand. I wasn't thinking straight. Each time I read one of her messages, I felt a pang of something, regret, maybe, or sadness for what we'd lost. But I never responded. Her words felt hollow, like a bandage over a wound she'd inflicted with intention. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. My lawyer, Claire, updated me on the progress of the divorce. Laura had received the papers, and as expected, she hadn't taken it well. Claire told me Laura's lawyer had contacted her with accusations of cruelty and abandonment. A laughable claim, given the evidence I had. She's scrambling, Claire said over the phone. They're trying to paint you as the villain, but it's not going to stick. You're in a strong position here, Nick. Just hold your ground. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the divorce papers Laura had refused to sign. She was stalling, hoping to regain control, but the longer she delayed, the more leverage I had. That evening, I decided to drive by the house. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see how Laura was handling things now that she'd been left with nothing but her lies. When I pulled up, the house looked the same. Tidy, quiet, unassuming. But as I parked across the street, I noticed something that made my stomach churn. A car I didn't recognize was parked in the driveway. It wasn't hard to guess whose it was. Ryan's. The audacity of it was almost impressive. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that she'd moved on without hesitation while I was left picking up the pieces. I sat there for a while, watching the lights in the house flicker as shadows moved behind the curtains. It was surreal, seeing the life we built now shared with someone else. A part of me wanted to march up to the door, to confront her and Ryan, and demand answers. But I knew better. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. The next morning, I met with Claire again to discuss the next steps. She had good news. Laura's stalling tactics weren't going to work. The evidence I'd provided, including her messages with Ryan, was more than enough to push the divorce through without her consent. She's going to lose more than she realizes, Claire said with a faint smile. The court will see this for what it is. You'll come out stronger, Nick. Her confidence was reassuring, but it didn't erase the weight of it all. Even with the upper hand, it was hard not to feel like I'd failed somehow. I'd given so much to Laura, so much to our marriage, only to watch it crumble in the most humiliating way possible. That evening, as I sat at Jake's kitchen table, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me I should. Hello, Nick? It's Ryan. I froze. Of all the people I expected to hear from, he was the last. What do you want? I asked, my voice cold. I thought you should know Laura's been lying to me too, he said, his tone bitter. She told me you two were separated, that your marriage was already over. She didn't tell me she was still living with you while we were seeing each other. I didn't know whether to laugh or hang up. The irony of Ryan complaining about being lied to wasn't lost on me. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because she's not who you think she is, he said. She's manipulative, selfish, and she's been talking to someone else. I just found out she's been seeing another guy behind my back. I let his words sink in. It was almost comical. Laura had cheated on me, then cheated on her affair partner, and now she was tangled in a web of her own making. Good luck with that, I said flatly, hanging up. I stared at the phone in my hand, a mixture of anger and satisfaction bubbling inside me. Laura's world was unraveling faster than I could have imagined. The life she tried to build on lies and betrayal was collapsing, and I didn't have to lift a finger. The next morning, I decided it was time to visit the house one last time, not to confront her or gloat, but to close the chapter for myself. When I arrived, the house felt different. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, Laura opened it. She looked tired, her face pale and drawn. "Nick," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see the house," I said simply. "To say goodbye." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity, not anymore. This was the bed she'd made, and now she had to lie in it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I don't know why I did what I did. I just want things to go back to the way they were." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the person I used to love. But that person was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. "It's too late, Laura," I said softly. "You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." As I turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the end of us, but it was also the beginning of something new, something better. Laura had wanted a life without obligation, without responsibility, and now she had it. As for me, I was finally free. Walking away from the house for the last time felt surreal. It wasn't just a house. It was years of memories, both good and bad. But as I drove back to Jake's place, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of Laura's betrayal, of her lies, was no longer mine to carry. The days that followed were quiet. For the first time in years, I focused on myself. I started hitting the gym again, reconnecting with old friends, and even picking up hobbies I'd abandoned long ago. It felt strange at first, like I was rediscovering parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. Laura tried to reach out a few more times, but her messages went unanswered. The divorce was moving forward, and there was nothing left to say. My lawyer had warned me that Laura might try to manipulate the situation to her advantage, but to my surprise, she mostly stayed out of the way. Perhaps Ryan's betrayal had humbled her, or maybe she was too preoccupied with her crumbling world to fight me anymore. One evening, I received an email from Laura's lawyer. It was a formal acknowledgement that she had signed the divorce papers. That was it, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I stared at the email for a long time, feeling a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, closure. It was all there, tangled together in a way that was hard to untangle. Jake, ever the supportive friend, suggested we go out to celebrate. "You're a free man now," he said with a grin. "It's time to start living like one." We went to a small bar downtown, the kind of place I hadn't stepped foot in since my 20s. The atmosphere was lively, the drinks strong, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself relax. As the night went on, I found myself talking to a woman at the bar. Her name was Allison, and she had a warmth about her that immediately put me at ease. We talked for hours about everything and nothing: our favorite movies, our jobs, the twists and turns life had thrown our way. I didn't tell her about Laura, not yet. This night wasn't about my past. It was about taking a step towards something new. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about Allison. It wasn't love at first sight or anything dramatic like that, but for the first time, I felt hopeful about the possibility of moving on. The next day, I received a call from Claire. "Good news," she said. "The judge has signed off on the divorce. It's official. You're free to start the next chapter of your life." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Free. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. For the first time in years, I was free to live for myself, to make choices that weren't tied to someone else's selfishness or betrayal. That evening, as I sat in Jake's living room, I reflected on everything that had happened. Laura's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't destroyed me. If anything, it had forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. Laura, on the other hand, was left with nothing. Ryan had abandoned her, and from what I'd heard through mutual friends, she was struggling to piece her life back together. I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. But I wasn't interested in revenge or gloating. I was interested in rebuilding my life, one step at a time. Over the next few weeks, I started dating Allison. It was casual at first, just dinners, walks in the park, and long conversations about life. She knew I was fresh out of a divorce, and she didn't push for more than I was ready to give. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "Nick, I don't know what you've been through, but I can tell you're stronger because of it. Whatever it was, it didn't break you." Her words stayed with me long after that night. The truth was, I had been broken. Laura's betrayal had taken everything from me, my trust, my confidence, my sense of security. But piece by piece, I was rebuilding, and this time, I was doing it on my terms. Laura might have taken a decade of my life, but she wouldn't take any more. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. Months passed, and life finally began to feel like it was my own again. The divorce was finalized, and the ties to Laura were officially severed. She tried reaching out one last time, sending an email that was equal parts apology and self-pity. "Nick, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I made mistakes, and I understand if you hate me, but I hope one day you can forgive me." I read it twice before deleting it. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give her. It was something I gave to myself by moving on. Laura's life, from what I heard through the grapevine, had continued to spiral. Ryan had moved on, and her reputation in our social circles had taken a hit. Friends she once considered close had distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the fallout of her choices. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I had my own life to focus on, one that no longer revolved around her lies and manipulations. Allison became a bigger part of my life as time went on. She was patient, kind, and honest, everything Laura hadn't been. She didn't try to fix me or push me to move faster than I was ready. Instead, she walked beside me as I navigated the aftermath of my marriage. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching an old movie, I turned to her and said, "Thank you." She looked at me, puzzled. "For what?" "For showing me that not everyone is like her," I said. "That there's still good in people." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "You've always had that goodness in you, Nick. You just needed to see it for yourself." Her words resonated with me. For so long, I'd let Laura's betrayal define me, but now I realized that her actions said more about her than they ever did about me. I wasn't broken because of her. I was stronger despite her. As the months turned into a year, I built a life that felt authentically mine. I moved into a new apartment, started volunteering at a local shelter, and even took up hiking, a hobby I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. Laura faded into the background, a distant memory of a life that no longer felt like my own. When I thought about her, it was with a sense of detachment, as though she were someone I'd once known but no longer recognized. One day, while organizing some old boxes, I came across a photo of us from our wedding day. I stared at it for a moment, remembering the hope and love I'd felt back then. It wasn't anger or sadness that I felt now, but acceptance. I placed the photo back in the box and closed it, tucking it away in the corner of the closet. That chapter was over, and I was ready for the next one. Life isn't perfect, and I don't expect it to be. But for the first time in years, I'm living on my own terms, with people who genuinely care about me and a future that feels full of possibility. Laura may have thought she was freeing herself when she told me she wasn't obligated to me, but in the end, she freed me, and I'll never look back.